Hello, everybody. My name is Matt, and I am joined by Josh.
Yeah, podcast nameless Josh.
Welcome to the first installment of a show we have no name for yet that you have probably found on the Outpost unknown YouTube channel. We're filmmakers, right? At least we used to be, mostly.
Yeah, that's what it's I'm a pretender. Just kind of pretend to make films, but it's still fun.
Yeah. So we are, I guess you would call us, if you had the categories, like no budget, micro budget filmmakers from Nebraska. I had my little consortium. Josh has his little consortium, and I don't never have the two cross paths. I don't think in terms of anything official. I think you were
No,
on set for like 1 hour for one of my shows, but
it
then
was.
you had to leave. There was fireworks going off. We don't even think we actually shot anything while you were on set. Is that right? I can't remember.
No, it was like filmmaking 101 for me. It was like, hey, move that light over here, and then when you're done, I want you to move it back.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what I did, and it was awesome. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So this show is basically going to be. I mean, we both have a lot of knowledge. We've been making like no budget movies for many, many years, and we thought it would be kind of cool to have a show on the YouTube channel that talks about the making of movies, the hardships that you have to go through when you have no budget and you're dealing with a very limited amount of resources, some of the benefits of it, the challenges. And so each show is going to sort of focus on a different aspect of filmmaking, micro budget indie filmmaking. We might also bring on in the future some of our friends who are also filmmakers, interview them, just doing various things like that. We're going to kind of wing it a little bit because that's just kind of how we roll. Josh, is there anything specific that you definitely want to make sure we hit on this podcast? What do you feel that people should get out of our shows going forward?
Well, I mean, said no, it's no, Nebraska filmmaking podcast, and I like I love Nebraska filmmakers. I love Nebraska filmmakers, and talking about their experiences and less about myself. I love talking to filmmakers just in general about their stories and their experiences, and that's kind of what I'm looking to get out of doing this is just talking to other people about what they're doing and their experiences in their life and stuff like that. I'm not really a talk about myself kind of person, to be honest with you. And so,
Except today, which we both
except
have to
today,
talk about ourselves.
right? And yeah, and that like get it out of the way today because after today, like I want to I want to hear other people's stuff. I'll talk to you. I'll interview you all day long, but me, like
Well, I think it's interesting to because every sort of micro budget indie filmmaker has different experiences, and they come at filming movies in totally different ways. And so yeah, we're over the course of however long the show goes, we will be talking about specific topics. We'll have people on, interview them some weeks when we can do that. But basically, this is just going to be sort of like a crash course on how to make an indie movie. If anyone out there is listening, you're like, man, I've always wanted to start. Like, where do I begin? We'll be talking about that kind of stuff. We'll be talking about, we might have some people on who know stuff about, audio, sound, lighting, all of that kind of stuff. But this first episode, we were kind of batting around what we should do for a topic for the very first episode. The very first episode is just kind of like get to know us show. So over the course of the next hour, hour and a half, what we're going to do is we're going to give our backgrounds as filmmakers to everybody so you can kind of see where we're coming from, what we've done in the past. And then we're going to have 5 questions that we ask each other, and neither one of us knows the questions that the other are going to ask. So who knows where the conversation may go? So that's going to be kind of fun, and then we're going to sort of wrap it up with sort of like a top 5 movies. So that's kind of people out there listening will be like, oh, what were like the main influences of these guys when they decided to become filmmakers and stuff? Like, what are they into, and what types of movies do they like, and things of that nature. So, with that, Josh, would you like to go first, discussing sort of your background and history, or do you want me to go first?
I mean, like I said, I'd rather talk about other people, but I mean, I'll go first.
Sure,
Sure.
go, go,
Might as
go.
well get this shit out of the way. Um, so I've been a micro budget filmmaker for like, I don't know, like 10 years, maybe something like that. And I started a company called Dream Awake, like in 2010 or 11, in that general area. It's, I don't know, something like that. Started just like I got some friends and I got together. We used to write. That's what we wanted to do. We were like, we want to write and like have other people make our stuff, and it's going to be a really cool thing. And then we discovered real fast that nobody wants to make your shit. That if you want to see your stuff made, you got to make it yourself. And so, with there's a really awesome, I don't know what we call it. I guess company in Lincoln, the Nebraska Independent Film Project is who helped us make our first movie. We had no gear, we had nothing, and they gave us everything. They're like, "Go, we want to see you make your movie," and it was super cool. And it started out as like, just get your friends together and write something and just go make it. And since then, I've made, I mean, a few feature films. Nothing that I would write home about. But that's totally cool because like every experience has been like it's just been learning and it's been a ton of fun. And that's kind of, I got really serious about filmmaking for a while. Like I was an asshole for a long time. And I don't know, I've never had this conversation with you, Matt, but I was took this like way like super seriously and was like, oh, it's got to be perfect. It's got to be this and it's got to be that. And then you learn real quick when you're a micro budget filmmaker, it's just not doesn't work that way. When you have no goddamn money, things fall apart.
Hmm.
And what I've learned over the last few years is like I just want to pick up a camera and write something and go out with my friends and have some fun. And that's kind of the filmmaker I am now. Is just it's every day is a crash course. And every day something goes wrong, and everything falls apart. And but I've right now, like as a filmmaker, I'm just having a ton of fun doing stuff. So that's where I'm at in my filmmaking journey right now.
Okay, cool. So yeah, you've been a filmmaker for roughly 10-ish years. Um,
Yeah.
I made my first film, if you even want to call it a film, in 1999 as a senior in high school in Aurora, Nebraska. It was a short film called A Ripper Runs Through It, and I had basically the story behind that was I had this art class in high school, art teacher named Pam Breckbill, and she was amazing. She was like one of those teachers that you always hear about that just sort of supports their students in every way they could possibly want. And our final project was to like make clay pots in the kiln. And I was like, I don't want to do that. That just seems stupid to me. And I asked her, I was like, can I, instead of doing that, can I make a movie? Because that's what I wanted to do. I had watched John Carpenter's Halloween with my mother when I was like 9. And that was the movie that made me say, "Whoa, that's what I want to do. I want to do something like that. That seems so fun and cool, and being able to, bring entertainment to people's lives, whatever." So I thought that was my perfect opportunity. That was my in. I was going to be able to do this really cool movie in high school, and that would sort of kickstart the career going forward. So I wrote this huge script. I knew nothing, right? I'm like 17 years old or something. I write like this 60-page script, and I was like, oh yeah, I could film this whole thing in a weekend. My friends'
Wow.
parents were gone in Las Vegas, so they allowed us to have the house for the weekend. I had all of these people, man. I had to say 30 people cast, people who said they were going to show up. And Friday rolls around after school, about 4 o'clock. Everyone's supposed to be on set, and maybe 3 people showed. and so we had to rewrite basically and just essentially do everything on the fly. It was just, we made up dialogue as we went along. The whole script had gotten completely jettisoned. I had built this entire like insane asylum with like Christmas lights inside of it and stuff, and like a parking lot with matchbox cars where I was going to burn it down in the big finale of this movie. And then the movie became something completely different because, nobody showed up and we kind of had to ad lib everything. So that was my first sort of experience making a movie. And from that point, I sort of the movie thing wasn't really on my radar because I was actually in a punk rock band with my friend. So we sort of did the punk rock thing here in Nebraska for a while. And then in 2005, that same friend's uncle basically got possession of an old movie theater in Grand Island, Nebraska. And he gave us a tour of this old theater, which I had been in when I was a kid, and I had a lot of great memories of it, but I'd never been like underneath it and behind the theater or behind the screens and stuff like that. And it was just I mean, you've been there, Josh. You've seen it. It's an awesome, awesome theater.
It is one of my favorite theaters I've ever been in. That's
Yeah.
not even a joke. It's awesome.
The Grand Theater in Grand Island. So anyone listening to this, if you ever want to check out a theater, definitely hit that one up. But at the time, it hadn't been restored or anything. Now it's been restored, so it looks very, very nice. But back when I first got a tour of it, it was a wreck. I mean, it was disheveled, but it looked awesome. And so I basically told my friends, I was like, "Can we make a movie?" And then luckily, the uncle was like, "Yeah, that's cool." So I wrote this script called A Grand Horror as fast as I could. Probably, gosh, it had to have been like less than 2 weeks. I wrote this script, grabbed a bunch of my friends, and we essentially spent every weekend that summer in the Grand Theater overnight. We'd show up on Fridays, we'd come back to Lincoln on Sunday afternoons, and we would film as much as we possibly could. And again, we knew nothing about making movies. We had a camera, an old mini DV camera. We were going to get a Canon. Was it H2 or something like that? But DJ who bought one off of eBay. It turned out to be a scam, and he lost his $2,000.
Oh my
So
God.
so we had to go to Walmart, and we bought like this cheap mini DV camera for like $300, but we didn't really have the $300. So after we were done filming, we just returned it and got our money back. I mean, it was just really, you talk about DIY. This thing was just put together with love and a prayer. Essentially, but we did. We got it done, right? And we finished this movie up, and I edited the thing on Windows Movie Maker. I'll love Windows Movie Maker as an editing program forever because that's what I edited my first movie on. Put it all together, and no, it's not a good movie by any means, but I love it because we had this amazing time, all these great memories, and we were able to pull through and get it together. So then we're gonna have a world premiere for it. And I was nervous. I can't be in the theater when my movies are playing because it just freaks me out. Like I can't do it. And I thought maybe there'd be 10, 20 people that showed up, just our friends and family and moms and stuff like that. The theater was sold out. Somehow it got around to like the local schools in like the high schools in Grand Island. I don't know if the Grand did that, promoting it or what, but the thing was a packed house. And I was terrified. I was like, how many people are going to walk out of this thing? Nobody walked out. I was in the lobby of the Grand the whole time. Nobody walked out. People came out. They were cheering. You could hear them like yelling and screaming during certain parts. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, I think this movie sucks, but I had to have done something right because it worked on some level for people. And when it was all over, we were all jazzed. We were hyped. We're like, well, when are we going to make the next one? And that's sort of how that all began. And from that point forward, with a few stops here and there, um, Dead Lantern Pictures is kind of what we called ourselves. We didn't have any like formal company or anything like that. We just kind of put together a group of friends. We're like, we got to call ourselves something. So we call ourselves Dead Lantern Pictures. And from that point forward, we just put out movies. Outpost Doom was the next one. Then we did The Eyes of Isabel,
Yeah.
which I'm sure Josh is going to get into at some point with me. Shivers Down Your Spine, Chills Down Your Spine, which were two horror anthologies. And
Hmm.
then we still have another feature, Return of the Robo Mummy from Outer Space, Part 7, which will be released someday whenever I decide to get around to it.
Right.
And so Dead Lantern Pictures is now done and over with. And last year I sort of old yellered it, but so I'm actually not making movies anymore. But from basically 1999 through 2021 was a little over 20 years. I was making
Yeah.
these no budget movies in Nebraska. So that's kind of my, and I wrote and directed them. I did have some
Right.
friends who would, my friend Tony Crumpton would provide a lot of scripts that I would write. But primarily, I'm a writer first. I always
Hmm.
have been. I became a director kind of by default. My initial original interest was special effects actually, and a Ripper runs through it. I did a bunch of the special effects in that, and I created them, and because I was really into art, and so I wanted to do gore effects and stuff like that. So I was into that stuff at first, but then I was the only one that would direct. Because my gift, if I have any gift at all when it comes to this kind of stuff, is management. I'm a good manager of people and keeping things on task, whereas that might not be the strength of others. My best friend DJ, his strength is knowing everything technically about cameras, about audio. He had his own recording studio. Like I said, we were in a punk band together. He would record other bands. Like he knows the technical things that I have no interest in whatsoever. So him and I are really good partners in that way, where I'm kind of like the vision. Like I set up the shots, and I'm like, here's what I want, to see. I do the casting. I do, all of that sort of production stuff. Whereas when we're on set, he's the guy he knows everything. F stops and everything else you could possibly think of with regards to cameras, and it's all his gear. He owns all of that gear, so that's another way that we kept costs down, because he just owns all that stuff himself, so we never had to pay for any of it essentially. And so that's kind of my background. I was writer, director. I edited all of the films, and yeah, that's pretty much what I did. So
Yeah. I mean, when all I wanted to do was write and tell stories. Same kind of thing, Matt. I kind of became a director by default. Like nobody wanted to do it. And I like you're great at managing people. I'm like the worst director in the history of directing. Like managing is just not. I mean, I'm not even like I don't blow smoke. I don't like try to sit here and be like, oh, look at my stuff. I'm king shit, because I'm not. The what I'm really good at is like the best thing. Um, so I'm part of Midnight Fright Films. If again, you got to call yourself something. Midnight Fright Films is what we go under now. Our films started to get way better when somebody came into our group that was a way better director than I am, and shit started going just better. And I can see that. I'm not blind.
yeah,
I'm a
I think it's
I'm a
important for any creative person to understand their faults, like what they're not good at. Personally, like I'm terrible at writing dialogue. I am just bad at it. I'm an overall story guy. Like for example, I'm writing a novel right now. The first chapter has no dialogue in it whatsoever. Because it's like I like to build atmosphere. I like to build, I'm great at being able to sort of come up with ideas and stories and putting people in situations. When it comes to actual dialogue of people speaking, another human speaking to another human, like I'm terrible at it. So I always have like my friend Tony, or it's like, hey, punch up the dialogue here because I know it's bad. So it's important
yeah,
to understand your strengths and your weaknesses, because when, and we could talk about this more a little bit later as well, but
right.
when we
Yeah,
when we get into sort of like when you have the cast there and you're talking to them, but I always tell them straight up. I was like, here's what I'm not good at, okay, so that when you get on set, you're not sort of shocked by what what's going on here? I'm
Ooh,
like,
right.
this is what I expect, and I just want to let you know that I'm not. My strength is not this. It's going to be this. So, yeah, no, I think it's good that I don't think you're an awful, horrible, the worst director I've ever seen in my life or anything like that. But I definitely think it is a positive thing for someone to, because I've known directors who have no self awareness whatsoever. I mean, we know one that was in Nebraska that had that problem, probably still does have that problem.
Hmm.
And it's not cool. It's definitely not cool, and it's like you realize like all the other people are kind of looking at you and laughing a little bit.
Right.
If you don't realize like, okay, here are my limitations. I understand. I try to strive to be better. Like I try to be a better writer. I'm sure you try to be a
Right.
better director, but sometimes it's like, hey man, I'm not going to be Michael Jordan. There's only one Michael Jordan. Doesn't matter how many hours another basketball player practices. They ain't going to be that good. And so yeah.
Right. Right. Um,
I'm sorry
yeah.
for cutting you
Well,
off.
no, 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 no. Like I said, for me, the best thing I've learned is collaboration is key. Um, and you see the stuff getting like not like light years better, but like a little better when you start collaborating with people that just have the strengths that you don't. That's kind of the best thing so far that I've done filmmaking wise. But
Yeah, and it also I think another big aspect to it is understanding what you want out of it, right? So is what you want out of it to make this a professional career? Because if you want to make a professional career out of it, that's a entirely different beast to tackle than just say, hey, like you said, I just want to have fun with my friends. I
right,
want those experiences and those laughs and those memories and creating new friendships. I mean, I would argue that the best thing that I've ever done filmmaking is not the movies themselves. It's all of the friendships, lifelong friendships I've made from people just being on set, casting
right,
someone I've never met before and just working with them and going through the fire, the crucible of what it takes to make something like this. And then being like, sweet, yeah, now you're going to their birthday parties and you talk to them all the time and you've created friendships that last. That's what's most rewarding to it for me. And I've told you this before. You know, when you invited me onto the set of Remission, it was a film that you and Tyler Schmid did,
hmm,
and it was actually being filmed, I don't know, like 3 blocks from my apartment at the time. So I was like, yeah, that was great, because that was an instance where every filmmaking project I had ever done, I was basically the one that had all the responsibility of putting it all together and making sure everything was on task and doing all that. It was so nice to just come on board as a crew member and say like, here's your one thing, do that. That's what that's what your importance to this project is. And I still remember those great memories. The audience has no idea how cold it was filming that movie.
hmm, right,
I mean, it was so cold. And we could talk about Remission at some point in the future too. Get into that because
yeah,
that was fun.
right,
But those moments when I'm just sitting there with like Eric Moyer and just sitting there and like we are freezing, but we're like, isn't this fun? Like this is just
right,
awesome, right? This is fun.
right.
It's like we are miserable, and yet you make a connection with these people. It's like we are bonding, going through this. So yeah, it's great. Like that's the reason I made movies.
Right. Yeah. And again, well, if you want to talk about remission down the line, that's cool. But like, I've been chasing that experience for 8 years now. You know what I mean? Like, that's just been like probably top experience for me making that movie. So it was fun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it was super, super fun. I wish that COVID hadn't hit because I had coaxed Tyler out of retirement.
hmm,
I had coaxed him because I'm kind of a worm tongue. That's one thing I'm really good at. I'm really good at being able to convince people to do things that they otherwise would not want to do. I've always had that ability of like charming people to like, come on, let's do this. And Tyler, of course, he had kind of retired from the game,
hmm,
and I remember you telling me, he's like, no, man, I don't think you're gonna get him. I'm like, good luck. And then I
right,
had him, and boom, we were gonna do this short film, and I got him out of quote unquote retirement, and then COVID hit, and our actress moved to another state, and it just became, fell by the wayside. But I don't think like as a filmmaker, like once you've done it, you never really retire. Like I always make sure I'm retired, I'm done, I'm done. I've quit a
Hmm.
number of times, but it's like you always get pulled back in. It's like I think creative people just have this sort of drive to keep creating stuff. Regardless of whether it's quote unquote good or bad or whatever, you just want to keep making something. And after a
Right.
certain point in time, you get so beaten down by the process of making the movie sometimes. It's so hard, it's so difficult that you're like, I'm retired, I'm done. And then 6 months later, your body has had a chance to recuperate. And then it's like, well, maybe it wasn't that bad, right? Because you sort of forget the bad aspects of it, and then you start remembering the good aspects of it and how
Hmm.
fun, and you're like, okay, I could do that again. And then you start getting into it again, and you're like, why did I do this?
Right.
Like,
Right.
why?
Right. Every time I've walked onto a set, not even halfway through, I'm like, oh, this fucking sucks, and I want to be done. So, um, I've almost quit multiple times, but
I have quit multiple times. I've quit right
it's
now.
it's so hard though. It's like, for me, it's kind of like that, like a drug a little bit. Like I just, I'm always kind of chasing that experience. And as
Well,
much as I want to quit, and sometimes, I shot a movie in the middle, like the height of COVID, like an
yeah.
asshole. And, uh,
I canceled my movie, and you shot yours.
yeah, good for you, man. Like you were a genius and I was an idiot. So, I mean, seriously though, like, but, it was a great experience though. And, that I played that movie in front of a super small group of people. And it was, again, a really good, fun screening experience. Just like you, I can't really sit in there and watch it with people, but I can hear people outside the door. And that's the shit that you go, oh, fuck, now I got to make another one. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's
People
what it
actually
is.
liked it.
Yeah. So,
It's like me with Isabel, man. I hate that movie. I hate it. And then it's just like
yeah.
you see all these people say, oh, how much they loved it. And I just want to be
Mhm.
like, I want to crawl into a hole or something like that. But okay,
That's,
we are going to have like 5 questions that we don't know. But I
yeah,
did just one just popped into my head
sure.
that wasn't part of the five that I'm going to throw past you. Okay, go all the way back to the very first day, right? So you've written the script, you've set everything up, you got your cast. It's going to be day one of the first time you're quote unquote on set as a director. Like you wake up that day. What are your thoughts? What are you feeling like? What kind of emotions are going through you on that first day when you've never done it before and you're like, okay, I'm in charge of this whole thing and all of these people.
Yes, I'm gonna drop a name, and Matt's gonna like scoff at me, but it's cool. So the first film I ever made, so I'm a genre filmmaker. I make horror films, just like Matt. The first film I ever made was not a horror film. It was based off of a play I wrote, and it was going to be a play I directed at a theater, and it was not. It was not. I, theater is expensive, and I couldn't find a space to do it. So I rewrote it for a movie, and the big thing I needed for that movie was a video store. The very first day on set, we shot in a video store, and I Kevin Smithed it. There you go. I dropped that name. Um, and
Hate Kevin Smith.
yeah, I know. Um, so I was stoked waking up on that first day because I was like, I can't believe I'm shooting in a fucking video store. This is gonna be awesome. We're shooting overnight in a video store. This is gonna be like, I was so
You've
excited.
hit the big time.
And exactly, like, how do you land, landing locations, like you'll find out, is not, that's not easy.
It's the hardest
And
thing, I'd argue.
yeah, and a location like that, we're like, oh shit, like this movie's gonna go to Sundance. So uh it, for me, I woke up super excited. But I love the story that I was telling at that time. And I was working with people that I had no idea who they were. I had a friend that just came back from film school. He was shooting it. That was day one though, and it was like, then I got on set and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea how
Hmm.
I'm blocking people. I have no idea where to put the camera. I have no, like, all I did was like, I wrote a bunch of foul mouthed shit, and I was like, hey, say this. And so my level of excitement kind of tanked pretty quick. once I actually got on set. Although I was still excited to be in a video store overnight with the key. Uh, as far as like the actual process, it went downhill pretty fast.
Yeah.
People are standing around waiting for you. And that's the shittiest thing too. Is
Yeah,
like
you
you're trying
feel
to
bad.
figure
You
out.
feel terrible.
Yeah, you're trying to figure it out in front of them, and they're like, they have no idea what the fuck they're doing. Excuse me, can I curse on this? Is
Oh
this
yeah.
okay?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
I didn't ask that rule, and I have a slight potty mouth, so life. But people standing around realizing you have no idea what you're doing, you feel terrible. You
Yeah.
feel terrible. Those people are like, for me anyway, like all my crew and actors and shit, like they're volunteers. That's what they are.
And most of them are your
People,
friends too. That's the thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so like I said, for me, it was a process of waking up like just happy as shit, and then getting through that first night. I was like, these people are never coming back. And the thing is, too, is like I felt that same way on Remission. I was like, day one, did our stuff. These people are never coming back because they realize 4 films later or 3 films later or whatever the fuck it was, this person still has no idea what they're doing. They're making it up as they go. And I was like, these people are never coming back. And everybody always came back. To my surprise,
Out of
people
pity.
people that's gotta be it, because I've got no other reason. People show up. Um,
I think people like just the process. I remember the first day I showed up after that Friday after school in 1999, being like you said, super excited, and then just being crushed when everyone who said they were going to show up didn't. I didn't understand what sort of like flakiness was at that point in my life. I didn't understand that all these people who said they would show up who didn't show up. But what it helped me with was I identified the core. Like the people who did show up were the people who basically continued with Dead Lantern all the way through, right? And so, but man, I remember like I was like you, I didn't know what to do. I was, just kind of ad libbing and making things up as I go, and it was just, one of those things. But the thing that really, I consider my filmmaking career actually starting off with the grand horror, because the Ripper Runs Through It, that was just kind of like a high school art project sort of thing. I mean, I was more stressed out that would I be able to finish it so that I could get a grade in in my class rather than I was going to make some amazing piece of work or anything. But with the grand horror, I decided we're just going to shoot a feature. It wasn't a short. I was like,
right?
we're
Yeah.
going to make a feature film in this theater. And man, that very first day, I was so excited. We get there, and you know how it is. It's like you think you're going to have scene one done in a half an hour, and it's
Right.
3 hours later, and we're still on scene one, and you immediately get behind schedule. Like you write up,
Right.
you do this whole schedule. You're like, okay, man, we're gonna do this. We're gonna knock all this stuff out, and then you realize how slow it goes. And I remember we had a clapboard, and about 20 minutes in, I was like, we're never using a clapboard again. And we haven't. I've
Right.
never used a clapboard since then.
I know.
And it's people talk to me like, how do you not use a clapboard when you're making a movie? Well, the easy thing to do is you put your audio through camera, and then you just have an ADHD brain that can look at the file, the thumbnails of all the file types, and know exactly which things you need, right? I mean, that's how I process it. I mean, it's very different from how other people work. But I dove into a feature length film, and that day was so draining and stressful. And I was like, how am I going to finish this? It was supposed to be like 4 weekends, and it ended up being 12.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everybody kept coming back, though. Just like you said, they just kept coming back. And we were able to push through and create something. Wasn't good, but I think that sense of accomplishment is like, okay, once you can show people that you can actually complete it, because the worst thing is to start something in the middle and just drop it. Then people don't trust you. Then people don't want to come on to the next film because they're like, okay, I don't want to go through all this again only for it to not be done. So we were, and same thing with Isabel. That thing was on the shelf for like 4 years before I put the whole thing
Right.
together and was convinced to do it. but we finished it, and it's kind of like just a badge of honor in a way to say I got it done. And that's, yeah. So that first day was just anxiety filled, and stress and whatnot.
Right. I remember that film I made was also the first film I ever made was a feature film, and when I went to go borrow equipment without telling me that like this is, are you sure? Like this is dumb. Like don't you want to make a short first? I was like, no, I'm gonna make a feature film. People are like, you're dumb. Like I mean, making a short is hard. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
making a feature film your first time out, crazy.
So what
It's
was the name of your
crazy.
feature film?
It was okay, so I've shown this one time in front of people, is in front of a completely full crowd at a theater at the Ross here in Lincoln. Um but the first film I ever made was called Love Me Suicide, and it was a drama.
Love Me Suicide. See, I haven't seen this. I need to see this movie.
No, you don't.
Yeah, I do. You've seen the Grand Horror. Come
I
on.
have seen the Grand Order. It was a lot of fun. And I've seen Outpost. I mean, I've seen all your stuff.
Yeah,
So
you've seen everything. You've seen everything.
But that one I kind of hide. That one, although it's near and dear to me and tells a very real story, like no joke. I don't take that out for people
Yeah.
and show them because it's like a dagger for me. So
Yeah, it's the same sort of way that, in a way, that the Eyes of Isabel is for me.
right.
I hate it. Like, and I think that's something important for people to know. Like, I think a lot of people who are on the outside looking in, they look at, okay, look at this local filmmaker made something. Man, this is garbage, and they probably have no idea it's garbage. So let me tell them how garbage it is, right?
Right. Yeah.
And what I would, let anybody out there listening know is, unless you're completely delusional as a filmmaker, and we've known a couple people at least who
Hmm.
are delusional. I mean, it exists,
Hmm.
but the filmmaker, in most cases, in 90% of the cases, you're spending hours and hours and hours with this movie, right? So you, as the filmmaker, you're editing it, you're going over every shot that you did, you're piecing it all together. Uh, close people to you are helping with that process. Maybe you have friends that are helping you edit. Maybe you have composers you have to show footage to. They all see it, and believe me, they tell you what they think about
Yeah.
certain things. The filmmakers know when something is bad. Like,
Hmm.
we know when it's bad. And I think a lot of people on the outside seem to have the impression that filmmakers don't in most cases, but in most cases we do. We know it's bad. And there are cases when we just don't want to show it to anybody. You're like, "Oh god, I'm going to feel so bad." Not necessarily for me. Like, I don't care if people are like, "Oh man, Matt made this garbage ass movie. It's terrible. Ha ha, let's
Hmm.
make fun of him." I feel bad for all the people that are in it,
That's
right?
it. Yeah.
Who have
Yep.
spent all this time, energy, and they're excited to see it. And if it turns out like garbage, I feel personally like I've wasted all of their times. And I want something to go up on screen that they can be like, okay, yeah. I mean, it's not the most amazing thing ever, but I can feel proud that I participated in that. I'll feel proud to be able to show that to somebody. Be like, hey, check out this little thing I did. To me, like the Eyes of Isabel, for example, is something that I feel embarrassed for everybody that's involved, and I just don't want people to see it because I feel it was done so poorly, and that's my fault ultimately. I mean,
Right.
we'll discuss that film in depth at some point, but it's
Right.
my fault ultimately, and I don't like my friends to feel that way.
Right. I had an actor, real quick, actually send me an email one time. And I'm not going to say her name. I'll tell you when we're done here if you want me to. But she sent me an email, and she's awesome. She's like one of my favorite people, just in general. Um, Sent me an email saying, "Can you please stop talking shit about your movies?" I was in that movie, and I don't hate it, and I don't think it sucks. And some of the people that are in your stuff don't hate it, and they don't think it sucks.
Yep.
And you're talking really bad things about that movie, and you're making us all look like you're making us all feel bad. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's just me talking on myself. I would never shoot down anybody that came out and worked on anything that I've done. Those people owe you nothing, and I owe them everything. But yeah, she sent me an email. She's like, you got to stop doing that. She was very nice about it. She
Yeah.
was super nice about it, but she was like, don't do that anymore.
Yep. Yeah, because you start almost getting because you're so close to it, right? The thing about when you write the script and then you direct it, it's like, I mean, you view it as your thing, right? Like with The Eyes of Isabel, for example, I had this grand idea for it. I was very passionate about it. And then everything went wrong while making that movie. Like everything. Compromise. I mean, that whole movie is just one giant compromise. It is not what I initially set out to do and wanted to do. And so when I look at it, I'm like, I hate everything about this.
Mhm.
Everything about the film itself, not the people in it, just the film itself. I just despise it with every fiber of my being. But then, you do a screening of it, and all these people come out saying how much they loved it. And you can tell they're not lying about that. It's not like they're just blowing smoke up your ass. They literally enjoy it. They've been entertained by it,
Right.
not for the reasons that you wanted them to be entertained by it,
Right.
but they've still been entertained by it. And it's hard for people like us, I think, to wrap their brains around what how other people perceive it, because once you put a piece of art out there, you have no control over it. People will view it however they want to view it, and they will get from it whatever they want to get from it. I might say, no, 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 you should be feeling this way about this, and they're like, no, I feel like this is a stupid B movie that I was laughing at because I thought it was really entertaining, not because it was some deep dissertation on and subverting expectations of a genre.
Right.
And
Right.
so it's very difficult for filmmakers like myself, and I assume for you as well, to sort of get into that mindset. But we got to be cognizant of it, right? Because all those people, yeah, there could be people who are really proud of it, and you start just shitting on it all the time, and they're just like, man, why would I want to work with you again?
Exactly.
You're just going to shit on the
Exactly.
movie again. So
Right.
cool. So yeah,
Right.
that's a little bit of a background on our stuff. And again, to all the listeners out there, we will go into far more detail on our various films and future shows and go into it. But to keep this moving along, we each came up
Right.
with 5 questions to ask one another, and we do not know what these questions are. They're going to be completely out of left field for both of us. So why don't you start? These are going to be kind of discussion topics a little bit, and we might end up going longer than an hour on this episode. Who knows? But
Right.
let's start with question number one. You can hit me with that, Josh, since you went first on describing your background as a filmmaker. I'll take the first hardball question from you.
Right. No, that's cool. So, trust me, we talked about this before we jumped on. Like these aren't hardball questions. These are like
You can't
you
tell the
know,
audience that, Josh.
oh, sorry. These are like the hardest questions I've ever asked anybody in the world. They're almost impossible to answer. These are so I questions that if I were to just not on a podcast, not in any whatever recording or anything, are just questions that I would sit down and ask Matt if I had the chance to just sit down and have a conversation back and forth, which we've done, but I've never asked really these questions. And you kind of answered a couple of them, but I'm gonna throw them out anyway.
Okay.
So when you started making movies, don't count the 1999 one because we know why you did that one.
Sure.
When you started making movies, what was your goal when you started? Um,
Oh, that's a great question. We thought we were going to be big filmmakers. I assumed naively that, well, okay, a little bit of backstory. I'd also been sort of a reviewer. I had a podcast and had reviewed horror movies for a website for a number of years. Around that time and slightly before we sort of decided to make the movie. And I went to school, film school. My degree, for example, is in film studies. And I thought I knew what it took to make a watchable horror movie, right? Because I had seen so many, especially low budget, no budget horror movies. I had seen so many of them that I was like, I for sure can make something better than Cannibal Campout or 666 Demon Child.
right,
This stuff would be on the shelves in Blockbuster, and I'm like, I can get my movie into Blockbuster. I just got to make one. I know how to make this. I can do this better than these people. How did these guys get their crap into Blockbuster Video? I want my movie there. That was the goal. Our goal was to have our movie in a movie theater, a movie rental chain like a Blockbuster or Hollywood Video or something like that. That was the goal initially. And so once the Grand Horror came out, and it actually, even though I didn't feel like it was obviously a very good movie, I'm still proud of it. I still love that movie to death, even though it's not good. I was like, okay, we can do this because we got some positive feedback from it. Not all of the reviews were terrible. Some because I would send these out to like people on the internet and stuff, just reviewers and websites, and we got some good reviews. Some were bad, obviously, but we got some good reviews. And I was like, all right, we proved that we could complete it. We proved that we could get some people who don't know us to like it and enjoy it, and tell other people that they enjoy and like it. We can make this happen. So that was the initial intent, to try to get something into like a Blockbuster Video distribution of some sort, make a movie and have somebody say, hey, here's a few $1,000s, can we have your movie, and stick it in video chains. That was the goal. And then we were hopeful that, by the time when we decided to eventually make The Eyes of Isabel, that we were going to make something that was going to be really good. Like, okay, this could be something that we could take around to conventions and things of that nature, and get our little Dead Lantern Pictures outfit some notoriety. That was the goal originally. Did that answer your question?
That was a great answer. Yeah. My goal was to just have my movie right by the porn curtain as you go into audio visual.
Oh, that was a
So
good
when
video rental store.
yeah, when people go back behind the black curtain and get their little weird movies, they grab mine on the way out. That was my goal, but I couldn't even get an audio visual. So damn it.
I love audiovisual here in Lincoln. I lived next door to it for
Yeah.
many years.
Five for five. It's a
Yep,
pretty good
five for
score.
five
Yep.
for five, and I would just raid the VHS horror section there and,
Yep.
and watch tons of them. But okay, so my first question to you, and these are in no particular order.
Yeah.
What was your most challenging day as a filmmaker? Out of all the things that you've done, what was your most challenging day, and what was that challenge all about?
You were there.
Oh, I was.
Um,
Okay.
you were there because you actually and I didn't know you, so it's definitely a day on remission. Okay.
Okay.
Um, I said you were there, and I don't think I knew you before remission. I think you came to the audition and anyway, it doesn't matter. You were on set that day. You actually helped kind of sort of like direct the scene because you could see that I was wandering around like aimlessly, not having any idea how it was a big thing. It was a big
Was that the zombie fight scene or?
That's the one, man. That's
Okay,
the
yeah.
one. The hardest day on that set was, I think we were there for like 16 or 17 hours that day. We wrapped at like 3 or 4 in the morning. It was ridiculous. Um, and it was a big zombie fight scene on the set of Remission. And there was a ton of moving parts. Every single actor was there that day. That was in the movie. Plus, I think we had 12, 13, 14 zombie people that a really great team, them, came in and dolled up and made into zombies. And it was one of the best and yet one of the hardest days I've ever had on a set. It was freezing cold in Nebraska, like negative temperatures in that warehouse. And people are standing around space heaters. Again, it's one of those hurry up and wait situations where people are standing around freezing their ass off, waiting for you to tell them to do something. Um, but that scene had a ton of moving parts and a ton of effects, and ultimately walking away from that day. And you actually, because you ran behind the scenes
Yeah.
on that movie, and I think you interviewed myself and Tyler at the end of the day, and you could just see the defeat, the defeat on our
Yeah.
faces. Like this was going to be the biggest, most epic fight thing ever, and in my life it was. But yeah, it was that was a tough day, and we were doing stunts and shit on that day, and we
Yeah.
had no stunt people. We had one person that kind of like
Crystal and Justin. They
That
were
was
the ones
it.
doing, yeah.
Yeah, and they kind of knew how to do that stuff safely. I was like, "Hey, body slam this person through a box," and they're like, "Well, let's figure out how to do that without killing that person."
I my distinct memory, and I think this was that same day. My distinct memory of that is there was a basement area where the zombies were going to come up, like up the
Mhm.
staircase and stuff like that. And you guys were up on like the main floor, and I was down there, and I just remember there being people like all in their zombie makeups, and they were just like no energy. I mean, they were just down because it was so cold, and it was just like you said, a lot of weight. And I remember going down there like I got to pump these guys up, and I told all of them like, okay, when we get up there, do the Michael Jackson Thriller dance, and I'll
Right.
play it, whatever.
Yep.
And I was like, just to get the spirits up here and to get people laughing and get some energy up because it was so like. I mean, everyone was just like, "Oh my god!" Like it seemed like there was panic. How are we gonna film all this stuff? And I remember we did it, and they all started doing the thriller dance, whatever. And I looked at Tyler, and Tyler just had this look of "I hate you, Matt"
Yep.
on his
Yep.
face. He was so mad, but everybody got up, right? The
Right.
zombies were now like they were re-energized, and it felt like the right thing to do at that point in time. And I think it
Right.
went well the rest of the day. But yeah, man, that was cold. God, it
Yeah,
was
it
so
was
cold.
a tough day, but like I said, one of the probably one of the best days I've had on any sets on any day, and yeah, so that's my uh that's my answer to that one.
All right, so to answer this question, man, I've had so many hard days making films, but I'm gonna go ahead and say the one that immediately comes to mind is the first day of filming The Devil's Corkscrew. The Devil's Corkscrew is a western that is part of the Chills Down Your Spine horror anthology, and one of the big things with me is I don't want to let anybody down, right? And so I have a great friend named Mark Popejoy who's the producer of this particular short film, which means I didn't fund any of it. It was a few $1,000s were dropped on it by my good friend, and so when we showed up on set, um, the whole thing was filmed outdoors. It was in this big field, had some trees in it and whatnot, but this big sort of open field. And I got there. Now, I'm terrified of ticks. That is my phobia, right? I'm just scared. I'm petrified of them. When DJ and I arrived at this location, because we had originally planned to shoot this film a year before, but there was a horrible torrential rainstorm that flooded the entire location, so we were not able to film it. And at that point, a year prior, Mark had bought all of this stuff, weapons and guns and six shooters and that kind of stuff, outfitted people in like traditional Western attire. So I mean, there was some money behind this. We never thought we'd be able to do it. But then the following year, the stars aligned. I got out there, and I had not seen this place since like the year before, just some videos, and everything in the year before, everything was flat. It was like flat ground. And when I got out there, it was knee-high weeds,
Hmm.
and there was no house for us to go to. There was no anything. And I told DJ, I'm like, if I get a tick on me, I'm going to have a panic attack and a nervous breakdown on set. And this thing is not going to be able to get filmed. And I was so terrified because I was like, Mark has put all this money into this, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. We had a horse on set. That was another hugely stressful thing. The horse ended up running away. That's another that's another story. But like all of this crazy stuff happened, and it was like we had one of our actresses. We thought it might be a little overcast because the day started out overcast, but then it became just not a cloud in the sky, and just the sun in the summer of Nebraska beating
Hmm.
down on everybody. And our poor actress, Lindsay, we love you. You are such a trooper. She was kind of wearing this like dress that exposed her shoulders and her back because she plays kind of like a prostitute. So she was fairly
Hmm.
exposed where no one else really was, and she just got sunburned like crazy. It was like heat stroke city. I mean, it was just
Oh my God.
people had to go home at certain points during it, and I was sitting there thinking, I was like, ah, my God, this is like my worst nightmare. Filming outside is like, I hate it. I absolutely hate filming outside. But we were able to make it through, and that was kind of like my most stressful day. The other stressful day, I will just say, as a side, was bed and breakfast, which is also part of Chills Down Your Spine,
Right.
and that was another. We actually filmed that in St. Joseph, Missouri, and Mark had also dumped a bunch of money into that. And I remember we got there, and then the actress's car broke down, and there was all these things that happened on that. I'm like, how are we gonna do this? How? But strangely enough, I feel like those are two of my best work. Like
I
ultimately,
saw
like
them both. Yeah.
I really like both of those and sort of what I was able to do with it. So maybe I just work better under extreme stress. I don't know, but those are like the two most stressful sort of days that come to mind, not including anything on Isabel. But
Right.
those are
Right.
that's
I
a
think
whole different story.
Isabel and Remission are like a completely different like podcast. To be honest, you fill a whole
Yes,
podcast with those
yes.
stories. So,
Focus on those.
um,
Yeah.
um, well, so this is kind of a question. Are you done? Sorry, I was like,
Yeah,
I'm gonna stop
yeah.
on,
I'm
stop
done,
on your
jerk.
storytelling.
I'm finished.
Um, you talked a little bit kind of about this, like kind of. When I asked about the goal and getting things in the blockbuster and getting things into Hollywood video and stuff like that. But one thing that I think because I've seen you in action do this, and I'm terrible at it, and that's okay. Um, you go to a lot of conventions, or you were going to quite a few conventions um, for a while there. Um, how did you like this is barely a question, more like just talk about it for a second because I think again this is like a whole other podcast. But like you're like really good, and DJ was really good at it too. Was pitching your film,
Yeah.
even if you think it's hot garbage, like you thought Isabel was. You guys sold that like it was an Academy Award winning movie. Uh,
Yeah, so
but you did,
we made a lot of money on it too.
yeah. But how did you like? How do you go about that? How do you? Because I think if again people take the same um kind of the same journey as far as selling their movie, whether it's pitching in front of a person or pitching in front of at a convention. How do you go about it?
Well, the original thing, I will give a lot of credit of this to DJ. DJ has always been the extrovert. I mean, you've met this guy. He's an
Mhm.
extrovert. He's got no shame. He's just very out there. And
Right.
getting to a funny personal story, way back in the day when we were in high school, my grandma, we lived in my grandma's basement, and my grandma was like, "You guys need to get a job." She just kept saying it over and over and over and over again. And DJ got so frustrated that he went and he found a job. And he came back and he's like, Matt, I just got a job and you can get one too. Come follow me. And it was a telemarketing company. So we became telemarketers. And we did that because I worked at other places that did a lot of phone work like that for many, many years. And you sort of developed a skill. It's like a challenge to convince somebody to take whatever you're offering them, right? And I always said, for my whole life, I've always been really good at convincing people to be able to do things. And in this case, became a challenge to us. It was like, what can we do to make someone hand us that $10, right? And so when we decided to go to conventions, we invested, I don't know, like $1,000 at the time or something to print up a bunch of DVDs because there were no Blu-rays, or we couldn't afford Blu-rays at the time or something. I don't know, but DVDs initially, and we were like, well, let's just take them all, let's sell them all for $10, and we can make, I don't know, a few $1,000s, and we could take that money and invest it into the next movie. And so that was how we basically generated stuff because we didn't have good jobs. I mean, we didn't have money per se. We were just trying to figure out a hustle that we could do to get some extra money, and it would also be fun. It would allow us to travel to different places. We could meet some people, and hustle a little bit, make some cash, and then because that's how Isabel was funded, was Outpost Doom and the Grand Horror, going to conventions and selling them all. We had a few $1,000s that was stolen from us, but that's another story. And
Yeah.
that's how we did it. And so yeah, it was a challenge of trying to convince people because when you get someone front of you, you don't. This is going to sound bad, and I don't mean it to sound bad, but you don't look at them almost as a person. You look at them in terms of like a mark,
Yeah.
how like an old
Yep.
carny would do it, right?
Right.
Putting the chalk on the back of their jacket or something, so okay, that guy's the mark. And so that's kind of how we looked at it. And also, we wanted to do fun stuff at the convention. We didn't want to be stuck behind the booth for all 3 days. So our
Hmm.
goal was to sell as fast as possible so that we would have nothing left by Saturday afternoon, and then we could just go dick around and have fun at the convention. so,
Right. Right.
DJ and I are really good. Like I said, we worked together. We competed against each other for many, many years. I mean, we're very, very good friends. And so he's like the over the top hype man, and I'm kind of like the quieter. I can get him a different way. So we each have our own talents in terms of getting people to buy, and even Steve's really good at it as well. Um, but we sort of balance each other. He can get the people that I can't get, and I can get the people that he can't get, and together, our powers combined, we're able to generate some money for future films.
Right. One of the one of the best. Uh, so we saw you guys. Tyler and I saw you guys doing this. We went to Kansas City, and I think the only other one we went to was Crypticon in Minnesota. And you guys were there, like 3 or 4 tables down, not that far away from us, and we could see you guys out in front of the table, just selling the shit out of these things. And Tyler and I were behind our table with just like 4 or 5, 6 different films on our table. And that was the thing too, is I think you guys only sold like one movie at your
Yep.
um, um, convention, and so there's nothing competing against itself. Anyway, I remember you guys came over and you're like, all right, give me your pitch. And we were kind of like, we kind of like did it. And you guys were like, all right, don't do that. Whatever that was, don't do that. And I remember, I think it was like Saturday. You guys had sold out, like you said, like within the first day or like real early into the second day.
Yeah,
And
Saturday by like 11, I think.
yeah, I think you and DJ, you came over to our table, and I think DJ sold more copies of our movie in like the 30, 45 minutes he stood there
Yep.
than we sold in 3 days.
Yeah.
And it was just like, and then like DJ left. Okay, we kind of listened to like what he said. Let's kind of steal a little bit, and then we try it, and it just would not work. And um, um,
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing about horror conventions. Everybody walking into a convention room in a horror convention and walking the booths and looking at the booths, they are there because they want to spend money. Very, very few people walk into the convention hall and are looking at all this stuff with like, I have no money at all. I'm just here to wander around.
mhm,
No,
right,
they bring disposable income. Now you are competing against lots of other filmmakers, lots of other films, lots of other different types of things, whether it's
right,
like artwork and things of that nature. You have to stand out, right?
right,
You've got to do something to stand out. You've got to make that person believe that, hey, when they give you that $10, they're not only getting this movie, they're getting an experience with it. And I know one of the big pitches that we would do is we would say, "You're we're not actually charging anything for the movie. The movie's free." And immediately when you say the movie's free, it gets them like thinking like, "What? What's the
right.
catch?" Right? Well, the catch is all we're asking for is a $10 donation, and that donation goes to funding the next film. So you become an investor in local film, and then next year you can come back to the convention. You can see the movie you helped create with your $10. In the meantime, we're going to give you this movie for free, so you can just have this movie for this $10 donation, and boom. That, I mean, you got to frame it. You just have to frame it correctly. You got to show passion, enthusiasm. You want the people to be, if someone's walking down the thing and they just sort of look. So many times we would see people like I walk down the convention hall, whatever. I'm looking at booths and nobody says anything.
Hmm.
Whatever the person selling is just sort of sitting there, and they're hoping that you become interested, and they hope that you pick it up and you say, "Oh, I like this. I want to buy it." Our philosophy is like, you have no interest in this, but we're going to make you have interest in this, right? So, like, we will tell people will be on the other side. We will go, "Hey, you over there." You make a connection with them, right? They turn, they look at your booth. Get over here. We want to show you something. Hold this in your hand. And they're holding it in their hand, right? You force them to hold it in the hand so that they have to look at it and they have to listen to what you're saying. it's an art. It's an art,
Right.
but not everybody can do it. I 100% believe, because a lot of people, I mean, you have to be able to have no shame in a way, to sort of be over the top and ridiculous and extroverted in many ways of that like that. But we've been to multiple conventions. There was one in Tulsa I'll never forget, where we were sitting there. Zach Galligan was across the way, directly across from us. But there was all these other filmmakers that were selling their movies, and we sold out everything, and they were basically having us pitch their movies and sell their movies for them, and we would package deal their movies with our movies to get more sales and stuff. And it was just like, we're doing work, right? You got to put in the work if you really want to sell it. And our goal was, if we're going to the convention, our goal is to make money. We're not there to have fun. It's not like a movie where we're just having fun with our friends and stuff like that. We are going there to do it as a job, and once we've completed the job, then we can have fun at the convention the rest of the time. So we would get, I mean, there was very, very few conventions where we would not be done by 1 o'clock on Saturday. And it's like, okay, we got the rest of Saturday to enjoy the conventions. We can go see the celebs if we want. We can go to the various, interviews and stuff that they're doing. Or we could just leave, like we did in Kansas City when it was in St. Joe. We're like, this sucks. Let's just go play miniature golf, and we left for the rest of the day to go play miniature golf. So
Right.
that was kind of how we did it. We looked at it as a job, and then we could have fun as soon as we were done with our job, and we wanted to get the job done as fast as possible.
Cool. I'm not going to talk about pitching because again, I've already explained that I'm really bad at it.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay. So my question is: you are a big writer. I know that you're a big writer. I sort of already answered this question for myself earlier today. My dialogue is my weakness when I'm writing things. I want to know, what would you say is your biggest weakness as a writer?
Oh yeah, so I'm kind of complete opposite, really. I'm really terrible like this, which is probably again, uh, probably why I'm like such a bad filmmaker in general because I'm really bad at writing action lines. Like I'm really bad at describing, not bad, but like my descriptions are really short. They're not super like descriptive of what's going on in a scene. I try to get through like here's like the real quick snippet of what happened, and then I get the dialogue because like that's my comfort zone is dialogue. Um, really bad at writing just like action lines and stuff. So I have a friend, Greg, um, who whenever I write something, I go, "Hey, I'm gonna send this to you. Will you punch all this up because it's just not. It doesn't tell anybody really anything. It's just like
Yeah.
short little snippets. So I have kind of him that is like I mean like really 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 good at it. I sort of kind of am jealous about like how good he is at just doing that part. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where I hurt in the writing department is I don't generally have a hard time coming up with ideas and I kind of ABC all my ideas before I start writing. Like I know exactly where everything is going to go in a scene before I get there. So I don't get stuck or the writer's block or any of that stuff. But yeah, the description action stuff, I'm just really bad at.
Okay. Yeah, that is completely opposite of me. So I should just send you my novel and let you write all the dialogue.
Yeah, I'll totally do that. No, no big deal.
Okay. Good. You've answered to my satisfaction. I'll allow you to continue.
Awesome. Um, so this question wasn't on my original five, but we talked about it a little bit. So I want to revisit this a little bit. You talked about you went to film school, right? You're like right
Well,
at
my major was film studies. Yeah, I went to
right,
UNL. I guess it's not technically film school in
right.
sense of that, but yes, that was my major.
Yes. So do you feel like your film school came from going to the university, or do you feel like your film school came from going out and doing it and learning it as you go?
My film school came from going out and doing it as I went, because I didn't actually like I wasn't in college yet when we filmed The Grand Horror. So
Okay.
I didn't actually go to college until I want to say late 2005 because I graduated in 2009. So I want to say late 2005. Like maybe I was going to start that fall or something. It's hard to remember, but
Right. I got
I wasn't actually learning about that kind of stuff if and formally in any way, shape, or form. Basically, what I felt like, it's a Tarantino answer. Like movies are your film school, right? So like I grew up with Sam Raimi stuff, Evil Dead 2, all those sort of like horror films from the 80s that I really loved,
Right.
and watching honestly, a lot of the shot on video stuff. Cannibal Campout was a very big influence to me in high school. John McBride, terrible, terrible movie, but one that I love dearly. Like, absolutely love it because, it's not always the really great films that you're learning from. You're also learning because everyone's like, "Oh, I watched Halloween, and yes, I learned from the master John Carpenter, and I wanted to emulate all of that kind of stuff."
Right.
But it's really the bad movies that you watch that you really learn from because those are the movies that you feel like, oh, I can do something better than that. Like I don't want to do that. I would do a different shot, right? So you're looking at a movie here like in Cannibal Campout, John McBride. It's a wide shot, whatever, and you can't really see the dialogue very well because the person is looking towards the side. But in your mind, as a creative filmmaker, if you want to be a filmmaker, like, no, 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 I would do something better than that. I would put the camera over here and I would have them angled this direction. And you start thinking of creative ways in which you would have improved a lot of these quote unquote bad movies. And that was kind of my film school. I would see stuff that I did not like because anybody watches a Hollywood movie, millions of dollars are put into it. Everybody's a professional on those. You're not going to really see quote unquote bad shots. I mean, you will, but not like a no budget indie filmmaker who doesn't know what they're doing is going to put. You're not going to see Cannibal Campout style shots in a Michael Bay movie or something like that. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
So the vast majority of people who watch Hollywood movies, you kind of know what good shots are when you see them. You're like, okay, this is professional. You kind of already understand the third rule without even knowing it, right? Just because you've seen so many movies that look like that, but you might not consciously be thinking of them that way. And when I watch so many low budget crappy horror movies shot on video stuff or things with no money whatsoever, I'm like, I know what I don't want to do. And I don't want to do a shot like that. And I don't want to do, a gore shot like that, for example. And so you
Right.
learn in your head. And that's kind of how I approached it. But I also read books like Lloyd Kaufman's, Make a Damn Movie. I can't remember the official title of it. I remember reading that book and getting a lot of information out because I was a fan of trauma films when I was an immature youth.
Right.
You think trauma films like, oh man, look at these guys. They're independent. They're doing it their way. They don't give a fuck, and they don't. And you learn that later on, like, well, maybe that's not the right way to go. But at the time, you're sort of reading about that kind of stuff and learning. So making the low to no budget films were my kind of film school, for better or
Gotcha.
worse. I might
Right.
have gotten some bad habits from them as well. I'm not going to say I didn't, but for better or worse, those were my film school.
Awesome.
Okay. Next question. What is on my list here? What film that you have done would you say is your best work? That you would say, okay, if anyone has to, if someone put a gun to my head and said I have to watch one thing of yours, what would you give them?
Um, I mean, I would probably throw Remission at them first. As far as watchability, I think Remission is the best thing that we ever shot. Feature film wise, Remission I think is the best thing we ever shot. Tyler was awesome on that set. He shot a great movie as far as I'm concerned. And he wrote a lot of Remission too. He had an idea, and I was kind of just part of it. But Remission is probably the movie that I would put in front of people and say, "Hey, this is what we make." And that's just not because it was the best kind of filming experience I had. It's just for me, like if I had to take one of my movies off of my shelf and watch it, that's probably the one that I would watch first.
Okay. I think this might actually surprise you. I think I have two answers to this. I have the answer that's in my heart, and then the answer that I think everyone would agree with. So the answer of my heart might surprise you. It's actually Outpost Doom. That is the film that I really adore. I just adore this movie because it was, other than a little bit of wackiness at the very end of the movie. Um, it was the movie that I felt closest that I set out to make, that I pretty much got what I wanted in terms of story and how I wanted to film it, and just the way it turned out. I really like how it turned out, even though a lot of people didn't get it. They didn't understand what I was really going for. Um, that was the movie where I was like, okay, I could really do this if I wanted to, right? And people might disagree with that. They might look at that film and like, oh, this is a piece of crap. It's garbage. It's boring. Like nothing happens and all this stuff. But to me, on a personal level, I was like, okay, the grand horror. I didn't know what I was doing. Without Post Doom, I was like, I went in with a plan. I was like, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and this is what I'm going to make it a specific way. I'm not just going to randomly hold the camera and hope that I got all the shots that I needed. I'm going to do a specific thing here. I have a plan going in, and for the vast majority of it, um, it met my expectations of what I set out to do, if that makes sense. And
Mm-hmm.
so in my heart, my favorite thing I've done, or what I would consider quote unquote the best for me personally, would be Outpost Doom. Now, the real answer I think would be Chills Down Your Spine. Chills Down Your Spine, I think, just from a technical level, from an overall quality level, whether it's acting, it's camera work, visual effects, that kind of stuff. I think that anthology, if you just want to consider it one big thing,
Mm-hmm.
is probably the best thing that I've done. And I would probably hand it to somebody of like, hey, as long as you're okay with R-rated material, there you go. There's a lot of naked ladies in it, but
Right.
you can. I think people. I've never really encountered somebody who was like, this thing sucks, right? I've never really encountered that. I've encountered people who've watched it and like, well, there was a couple short stories here I didn't really care for, but
Right.
no one's ever come out and been like, this thing just in general is bad. It's like I would recommend nobody watch this sort of thing. I've not encountered someone in real life that has done that. I'm sure there's people online that have written reviews that say it sucks, but by and large, I mean, we got glowing reviews for it.
Mm-hmm.
I was very proud of how it all turned out. I mean, everybody did such a great job on it. So that's technically my best, but not what's in my heart.
Yeah. Near and dear to my heart, if I had to say one of the films that I made, and it's just because it's a film that I can't let go of. Um, like it haunts me constantly to make more of them. And it's a short film I made in 2015 called Emily.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that is a movie, and people. I've had people, not people. I've had friends almost kill me over just not stop talking about making more of those. Because we that was originally a feature film, and we failed on it twice. And the only way to get it made was to cut it down to the short that it is. But there's so much more story to that movie, and so yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that as a filmmaker, like what you're closest to, right? It's like there's differences between like a personal attachment to something that really means a lot to you, as opposed to, well, this is technically quote unquote better, right? So it's just always interesting to hear that from filmmakers, because every filmmaker I've ever encountered has one film that they've done that does, like, that is their baby. Doesn't matter how
Right,
good it is, doesn't matter how bad it turned out. It's like, that is my baby. I love it, warts and all. Yes, my baby went to
right,
prison for 20 years to kill after murdering somebody, but I still love my baby, so
right.
to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, I think you're
All
up.
right. Yeah. So here's I'm gonna say it's the last question because it's kind of a two-parter. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm counting it as two, but it's the last question. All right. Um, Of your filmography, what film would you give a sequel to, and what film would you like another crack at that you could remake?
Oh, very interesting. Considering that there was a sequel to Chills Down Your Spine, like majorly in process, that's the easiest answer. Tingles Down Your Spine was going to be the sequel to Chills Down Your Spine, and I had a lot of crazy stuff planned for that. Like, I'm sure, I mean, you've seen Chills Down Your Spine, you know kind of how big it was in terms of just resources, and we kind of leveled up what we were doing with that movie.
Right.
I don't know if you ever saw the like what was planned for Tingles Down Your Spine. Imagine Chills Down Your Spine like times 1,000 on steroids. I mean, this thing was. I mean, we had like 6 or 7 different genies, all doing like
Mhm.
their own Avengers Endgame style storylines, and it was all going to connect with all of these various other short films. Too big, very, very, very big. But
Right.
that's the easiest. But if you're if you're saying a film that is part of an anthology, but not the actual anthology itself, because that's kind of a cheap answer to say, well, tingles down your spine.
Right.
Gosh, something that I want a sequel to. I have to bring up my IMDb. I can't even remember all the things that I've done.
Right.
I would. I don't know. I mean, that's the honest answer. Like, I don't really know.
Right.
I've never really thought of it in those terms before. Maybe no, I don't know. I'll have to think on that and get back to you on a future episode because I don't really
That's
know.
cool.
In
That's all
ter-
good.
in terms of films that I would have another crack at and redo, I would probably say the Grand Horror. I would remake my first film because now knowing what I know now about filmmaking and sort of seeing what I could do. Like for example, with the Grand Horror, I didn't know how to edit. I had no idea how to edit a movie. I'd never done it before. For a Ripper Runs Through It, it was basically my friend and I took 2 VCRs and we're trying to like patch things together on 2 VCRs with 2 VHS tapes. And
Right.
so I didn't know how to edit. Um, I oftentimes think about like I have all of this Grand Horror footage. What would happen if I went back and re-edited the thing now that I know how to edit? I have 30 hours of footage from making that movie. 30 DVD tapes. They're all filled, an hour a piece. And I was like, and you know me, and my whole philosophy is as many angles and shots as possible. There are so many different angles I have. If I went back and re-edited that thing, how different would that film look? But I also think that if I could refilm it with a better camera and all that, I think it'd be immensely better. And so probably the Grand Horror is what I would remake. So that's what I have there.
Boom.
Okay, so final 2 questions to you.
Sure.
My fourth question here was, what is the most creative way you have dealt with having no budget whatsoever?
Oh shit. I'm about to pull out that whole "I got no answer" thing and throw it at you. Um, I mean, we've never made movies. We've never had any money with movies. And yet somehow have like I'm gonna bring up Remission again because we had no money to make that movie at all. And if you watch that movie on a scale of like the set that we shot on, that was free. We paid nothing. It was $0 to film in that one location. A lot of the time, dealing with no budget is you write for locations that you know you can get. That's one thing that I just do. Um, um, as far as like working with people, like again, I, I started out working with friends, so friends were just like, "Oh, it'd be cool to shoot a movie." As you do this longer, you have people that are like, "Oh yeah, I'll do that movie with you, and as long as you feed me and give me an IMDb credit, we're cool." Um, said creatively, you just have to said write for what you have, and
Yeah.
for me, it's always been zero, um, or the little bit of money that I could out of my own pocket stick into a movie. I would do that, but I'm definitely not rich.
Yeah.
My bank account is pretty shallow, so
Yeah, the I guess that's probably the most creative thing any no budget filmmaker does on a movie. Now that I think about it, is how do you make the sparse amount of resources last, right? If you want to make a gory horror film, how do you do it without a budget? Because we know effects artists who aren't cheap. They're like, hey, it's going to take this much money for the prosthetics. It's going to take this much money for my time.
right,
And it's like, do you scrounge it up or do you creatively write around that sort of limitation, for lack of a better
right,
word? Um,
right,
and so yeah, it's definitely difficult. With chills down your spine, for example, Mark basically funded that whole thing. He was a producer on it, and he was in charge of raising all the funds and divvying out whatever, finding 5 grand for bed and breakfast, however he can scrounge it up. I'm like, I ain't doing it. So if you want
right,
the movie made, you're gonna have to do it. Shivers down your spine. We famously made that for $750. And people, when I say that, laugh at me. They're like, "There's no way you just lied. There's no way that you made this movie for $750." In one sense, they are correct, but in the sense of what you see on the screen in Shivers Down Your Spine for all of those short films, absolutely $750. That is all we spent because I tallied it all up. If you count, okay, well, you know, extra things like okay gas money to drive to Omaha, then yes it's going to go up a little bit, but we only counted like what was on the screen, right?
right,
750 bucks. All the locations in Shivers Down Your Spine are just friends lending us the locations that we needed. The actors all did everything for free. And it was just, any of the gore effects and stuff, we pretty much did ourselves. I know Heather jumped on and did some
right,
for like a bad heart and stuff like that. But pretty much the budget went to stuff people like her, and I was like, I don't care. I mean, do it as cheap as you can. Like, give me the cheapest thing you could possibly do. It's my responsibility to make it look good. Don't worry about it, and I'll
right.
try to make it look
Yep.
as good as possible. So
Mhm.
that's kind of what I went. But with Chills, I mean, Mark, we could have Mark on here at some point in the future. But
Right,
Mark spent a lot of money on that, and to be fair, I think it shows. And that was something that was new to me, having that kind of budget and those kind of resources on something, because I was never going to spend
right.
that much money on it. So yeah, the creatively, like how can we find some Caro corn syrup? Well, you don't buy Caro corn syrup, right? I mean, that's what Sam Raimi did. He bought Caro corn syrup. You don't buy that. You buy like the Walmart Great Value brand of Caro corn
Right,
syrup, right? You don't
right,
buy the $2 bottles. You buy the 75-cent bottles, and you get the
right,
the cheapest stuff you could possibly do, and you make it work. I remember with the Ripper Runs Through It, I had no money for that. How would I make all the guts and everything and the skeleton? Well, I had a human skeleton, a real human skeleton that I borrowed from our biology class, Mr. Binfield. We called it Benny's Bones. It was a legitimate human skeleton, and so I took it. And then I was like, how do I just, because I wanted to lay it out on a table and make it and have my friend underneath the table with his head poking out to kind of make it look like it was his destroyed body on this kitchen table. And I
right,
was like, how do I make the guts? Well, I decided to take foam expanding sealant and I just sprayed it all around to sort of make it look like intestines. And then I went to the art class in school and I just used all their paints and I painted it all like red and nasty and gory. And then I put like this sort of lacquer glaze on it to make it look like it was all wet, and kind of put it up in the skeleton stuff. And it was like, to me, I mean, that looked pretty cool.
right,
That kind of thing. It's like
right.
you just do what you can with no money whatsoever, and you got to be creative with it.
Did you find? I mean, the word's not easier because of course it was easier, but like, did you find yourself, because now you've worked with a budget for chills and you've worked with $0. What was there a lack of kind of? I don't want to say like a lack of creativity because that's definitely not the word. Um, but did you?
Was it harder, basically, or was it easier or harder? with having money and being able to do. I would say this: having a budget, far more anxiety filled, far more panic filled.
Right.
All of those things that we shot for chills down your spine, like part of the reason, I mean, we can get into this on another show, but part of the reason
Right.
that tingles down your spine in Dead Lantern, like tingles down your spine, I killed it. Dead Lantern is done, is because I had a major health scare while making that movie,
Hmm.
and it was because of all of the stress that came along with all of this money and trying to get just it's hard enough to make a no budget movie. Imagine extrapolating that tenfold and trying to do a quote unquote professional thing. And I
Right.
couldn't handle it. Like, I literally could not handle it. And I was like, my health is more important than this movie, which ultimately is what led to there being no more Dead Lantern. And so I would say, like, the creativity's still there. Like, I had the ability to continue to do the things I really wanted, because when you have no money, you have to compromise, right?
Right.
That's part of what happened with Isabel, right? I had all these grand plans, but I had to compromise on anything because our money got stolen and all of this shit. And with the actual budget, and I was like, okay, I have money to play with here. We can. This is what I want, and I got it. Mark got it for me. And
Right.
so
Right.
the creativity thing wasn't a problem. It was the incredible amount of stress to be like, my friend has put up thousands of dollars. I cannot screw this up, because if I
Right.
screw this up, I'm fucking him pretty hard here, and I do
Right.
not want to feel that way. I don't want to be responsible for that. It was
Hmm.
just anxiety filled nightmare. So on one hand, it allowed me to be creative and do the things that I wanted to do, but on the other hand, it made me feel really like paranoid and freaked out that like I would be on set, right? And it was a lot harder for me to do the things that I wanted to do, because I'm like, oh shit, we got to keep moving. I got to get this thing done. I can't take my literal, like, okay, it's going to be 3 hours on this scene. I got to get it done in an hour. I got to
Right.
stay on schedule. I got to do all this, and I did not work well under those circumstances. Well, I guess
Right.
arguably you could say I did work well under them, because I think the product turned out well. But
Right.
me personally, for my health and my mental well-being, I didn't work well under those. So I really didn't like it. Um, and I think with low budget or no budget, when you have no money, you give yourself an excuse almost, because it's like, well, if it screws up, like if it doesn't turn out well, you say, well, it's not really my fault. I didn't have the resources that I really wanted to do, right? You kind of give yourself this mental out that, well, it's as good as it could be because I didn't really have what I needed. And some people can look at it and be like, oh, well, that's just a cop out, and I think it is in a way. um, but you justify things different when you have no money, as opposed to, here's $10,000, go wild, sort of thing. It's just more difficult in different ways.
Right.
Okay. Let me see. Do I got one more with you? Yes, one more question for you. And I will actually give credit to my fiance, because she came up with this question. We were sort of doing a powwow last night of questions I could ask you, and she's like, "Well, this would be a good question to ask him." I'm like, "Okay." So this is from Alyssa. If you had unlimited budget, Josh, what type of movie would you make?
I mean, it wouldn't change. So I'm a genre filmmaker. I make horror films. That's what I grew up watching. That is what I love. Um, and even with an unlimited budget, I would make a horror film. That's just what I would make. I would make the horror film that um, I couldn't make with, I guess, the money that I have now, which is zero. Um, but I also kind of going back to the budget thing with you, like I don't know now. I don't know how I would make a movie with a budget, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it's weird.
Uh, when you go for as long as we have or I have or whatever with no money, trying to just scrape these movies together. If somebody handed you money, I don't know what I would do with it. Um,
It's hard, because then you have all these other things you got to think about. It's like, well, what? Okay, how much of this money do I put towards special effects? How much money do I put towards this and that?
Mhm.
And then it's like, oh shit, well, the money's starting to run out over here. Do I pull it from this other area to put in there? And then there's just mo money, mo problems.
Right.
you know that saying, and that is exactly right. And I thought, and this is a discussion for another day. But one of the
Right.
short films, I did a short film with Mark, and for Chills Down Your Spine, the only reason it exists because I had retired after Shivers Down Your Spine and Eyes of Isabel. I was like, I'm done. And Mark pulled me back in, and I was like, I have these stipulations, right? And they were things that I thought I would want. And then when I got them, I realized I do not want them. It was a nightmare,
Mhm.
it made filmmaking very non-fun for me, and and whatnot. So there's you have to sort of, and sometimes you don't know this. Like I didn't realize filmmaking was not going to be fun when I got everything I wanted until I got everything I wanted. you know, um, and I think there's a charm and there is a value in being able to negotiate filmmaking with no money, because I feel like that it's an undervalued sort of trait to be able to do. I think a lot of people don't. Number one, no one really has any idea how difficult it is to make a movie until
Right.
they've been in a movie. And I don't want to hear from actors. I know actors say, "Oh, it's so difficult to make movies." No, it's not. You're not spending the hours writing the thing. You're not spending
Mhm.
hours editing the thing. You're not spending hours working on the sound design and the music and the special effects and the visual effects and the marketing and all that. No. No, people like Josh and I know what it's like to go through the fire to make one of these things. And most people, even people who work on the films and who will show up on set and they'll hold the boom mic here and there and they'll act as if they don't know what it takes. They have no idea. And
Right.
so, and so, there's value in that. I think it builds character of people. I think it allows people to share experiences with one another. They're like, I get you, man. I get you. No one else is going to get you, but I get you. People can say, they can talk all they want in the background about, whether it's whether it's good, whether it's bad. I'm like, how hard it was to just make this thing. I'm proud just to have it done. That that's
Right.
that's a goal. The goal is to get
Right.
it done. You want to make something really awesome, but the odds are you're not, right? The vast majority of Hollywood movies are garbage, and those movies have millions and millions and millions of dollars for their budgets,
Mhm.
and they're all made by people who have been pros in their field for decades, and they still come out shitty. So, like, don't come at me with all your movies garbage and craps. Like, number one, I already know. Number two, that's not the point. The point is to try to get it done and put something up on screen that your friends and the people you've become friends with don't feel embarrassed to be a part of, right?
Right.
It's like, Remission. I don't think anyone coming from the outside would just be like, Remission is this amazing piece of cinema, for example.
Mm-mm. No.
But everybody on Remission is, proud of it, and they would show it to people. They're not like, oh God, I'm not going to show this to anybody. Like, it's, you know, I don't know, I don't know. But you kind of get what I'm saying. I know you get what I'm saying.
Right. Right. Yeah. So I would make all the movies that I've made. I feel like the spirit would be gone if I tried. If money wise, I'd be like, hey, how do I just pay the people that help me do this more than anything?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Because that's all I'd really change on any of the movies that I've made, garbage or not.
Effects
There-
budget. Come
There's
on.
this, there's a yeah, the movies that I've made that have had effects, I guess, but like the spirit in those movies, like you don't get that with a budget. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
It's kind of like punk rock, right? You have those garage band punk rockers. On a technical level, maybe the quality of the recordings and the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the songs themselves might not be great on a technical level, but
right,
there's character and love and spirit that comes through some of that stuff just because of the passion they put into it. And I think that's what comes out. And I think when people like quote unquote try to review these, and I used to be a reviewer who was hard on these types of movies when I was young, but as you grow older, you realize I'm like I was looking at the wrong things with these movies.
Right.
I wasn't looking. It's not Hollywood movies are judged based on specific criteria. No budget movies should also be judged on specific criteria. Do you get that passion and that love and that be like, hey, I would love to have been on the set with these guys. Yeah, it wasn't perfect. They didn't make a great movie by any means, but I felt like they were really trying and they weren't just shitting something out as fast as they possibly could and doing everything in one take just so they could say, hey, I made a movie. Haha, look at that. You know?
Right. Right.
And I think that comes through on most of our stuff. Not all of it, but definitely most of it.
Right.
Okay, well, let's wrap up this first episode with talking about our top five movies, and we could just do quick. We don't have to go into any depth as to why these are our favorites, but we'll start with your number five. Your number five favorite
Okay.
movie.
So here's the thing, Matt. I told you before we started, I wrote a list of 5 movies,
Right.
and I did. And as we've been talking, I'm gonna cheat now,
You're gonna do 10 now?
because no.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna cheat in the way of I wrote down filmmakers and their movies that I guess I
Okay.
kind of um try to model the stuff that I make after.
So you're not
Like,
doing your top five directors?
no, I wrote their movies down because they made movies that I love.
Okay.
Okay. So um I started with Brian Bertino. He made one of my favorite films is The Strangers. He also made a movie called The Monster and The Dark and the Wicked. I love every one of those movies. And again, everything on my list is going to be horror because that's just the genre that I go towards. And I'd rather watch a horror film over any comedy, over anything. Um, number five, I'm gonna go with The Strangers.
Okay. The Strangers. All right. All right. My number five is, obviously the caveat. People's lists change all the time, so my number five could be interchanged with a thousand other movies probably. But my number five, I kind of went when I decided to make my list. The films that were most impactful for me as a filmmaker in terms of being sort of wowed and mesmerized by what I was seeing. My number five is James Cameron's Aliens. I think this is like a perfect movie. The Not the director's cut. I think the director's cut has problems. The theatrical version of James Cameron's Aliens, I think, is a perfect movie, and the reason why I love it so much, not only because of the action and all that stuff, I love the fact that this is an ensemble cast where every single Marine that's in it, you remember them. Doesn't matter how small their part was or how many two lines that they might have had. Uh, James Cameron was able to convey everything he needed to convey about those like minor supporting characters in just a couple lines of dialogue in most cases. Like you remember Apone, for example. You remember Drake. All these guys die off really early. Frost, right? They all die off early in the movie, but you remember them. And I always felt that was super powerful about an underrated ensemble piece in which every person in that cast is memorable. Vasquez, Hudson, Hicks, Ripley, Bishop. You can go on and on and on. And so I really, really like Aliens. That'll be my number five for now.
Cool. My next one, I'm gonna throw out there because I do love this movie, but it was more the experience of seeing this movie for the first time. So I wrote down Jordan Peele's movie Get Out.
Okay.
I love that movie. But more than that, the experience I have seeing that movie in the theater, there was like maybe 10 people in that theater when I went. I went late. But there was an African American couple sitting right in front of me at that movie. And at one point in that movie, I'm not even fucking kidding, they both turned around and just stared directly. And I slunk down into my seat and felt like the worst human being on the planet. And as I sat
White
there
guilt.
enjoying this movie, but Jordan Peele, just as a filmmaker in general, um, I'm a fan of his stuff. But Get Out is my number four.
Cool. My number four. I'm gonna say one movie, but it's part of a trilogy, and I consider the trilogy to be all one thing. That's Empire Strikes Back. The original Star Wars trilogy is my number four. The main reason why this is on here is because these were the films that made me want to be creative. And I saw Star Wars. My mom showed it to me when I was very, very young, and we always had, the videos and stuff like that. She was always a big fan of Star Wars, and I watched those movies, and it was like world building. So many different aliens and creatures, and the story was great, and heroes and princesses and stuff like that. When I was a kid in the 80s, in elementary school and whatnot, that's what piqued my creative interest initially. That's what made me want to write. I used to write stories in elementary school all the time, and a lot of it had to do with like that kind of stuff. So the original Star Wars show, Empire Strikes Back. If you had to nail me down on which one of the original is my favorite, but the whole trilogy kind of really was formative for me in my youth.
Is I'm really I think it's I'm really glad you brought up Star Wars because on my original list I wrote down a film that I saw when I was a kid that I loved watching called The Last Starfighter.
Oh yeah, that's a fun
And I
movie.
always thought that was better than Star Wars. But I was never a Star Wars.
False, false, but I like the movie.
No, you're okay because I'm not a Star Wars fan, so that's just why I
Sure.
have that feeling. But as far as trilogies go, my trilogy that I wrote down is a little different than your trilogy. I'm a fan of speaking of indie filmmakers, fan of Adam Green, and Adam Green made a little
Okay.
trilogy
Hatchet.
called Hatchet,
Yep.
and I fucking love those movies. They are exactly the spirit that I chase when I go out and make some of the stuff that I'm making, and definitely a an inspiration behind the current trilogy that I'm working on. So
Okay. I like the
yeah,
first Hatchet. I remember not liking two and three. I felt like two and three didn't quite live up gore wise and just
right,
fun wise as the first one. But I have to
agreed.
go back and look at two and three again. But okay, yeah, I
And
love
then,
the first Hatchet. I think the first Hatchet's awesome.
so yeah,
Okay.
that's
My number three. Now we're getting into John Carpenter land here. John Carpenter is my favorite director of all time. Him and Terrence Fisher. But John Carpenter is kind of like my idol, so to speak. I worship at the throne. That is John Carpenter. The Thing. His version of The Thing is my
mhm.
number three. My mom always loves to say that this was the first movie she ever took me to because I had just been born and she took me, or she went to go see The Thing and took me with her. And I was apparently just staring at the screen the entire time. So I don't have no recollection of it, but she was like, "That's the movie." Uh, Everything about that. I think this is like the perfect movie for suspense. Perfect movie. It's a masterclass in how to make a suspenseful movie, and it also has like the cool effects and stuff in that. So The Thing is my number three.
Again, just like going back to our conversation about pitching and selling and how this person went away about selling this movie. And again, I love this movie. Um, was George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Again, something I hang on to. Again, one of the better filmmaking or film going experiences I've had. I saw this movie. They used to do this thing called Movies on the Green downtown
Oh yeah,
on
yeah.
campus. Um, wasn't the first time I saw that movie, but as far as experiences go, is one of the better experiences I had seeing this movie. Um, and again, just as a way of how he went about kind of selling this movie and getting this movie seen, experience wise, it's just a film that I go towards. So, Not a Living Dead,
Okay.
number two.
Yeah, great movie for sure. My number two is I mentioned this movie earlier in this show. This is the movie that I watched. My mom loved this movie. She let me see it when I was like 9 years old. Halloween, another John Carpenter joint. I remember watching this film when I was a kid, and I was enamored with it. I could not believe what I was watching. Like I thought I was so engrossed with it, and it made me as a kid want to be in the movies somehow, make movies, do this sort of thing. Halloween is, you know, my top two will probably never change. And Halloween is just one of those films that I literally would not be here today doing this. I would not be on this show discussing movies or anything with you had it not been, way back in like 1988 or whenever it was that I got to actually see Halloween for the first time and sort of set me on my course to doing of all the things that I've done, good things, bad things, whatever it may be, film wise. Halloween will always just be up there for me for that. So my number two is John Carpenter's Halloween.
Cool. Well, I'm going to throw out this last person, and again, you're going to scoff, and that's okay because you hate them. But at least I didn't say Rob Zombie. So um, I could be like, I like Rob Zombie's Halloween, and you'd be like, fuck you, this podcast is over.
Yeah, I'd get a new host.
Well, you might anyway, because here it goes. You talk about making about who you watched who kind of inspired you to make your first film. And I kind of mentioned this towards the top when we were talking about making our first films and everything.
Don't do it.
Indie wise,
Don't do it.
Indie wise, but not even filmmaking wise, podcast wise, and
I
just
get
the
you.
way
Yeah, I get you.
Kevin Smith, Clerks. But not only Clerks, okay, because he made Clerks with no money. And I love that film because it had no money and it had a spirit to it, and it was indie as shit. And just the way they went about making that film. But not just that, because I figure if I'm gonna run it into the ground, I might as well run it into the ground as hard as I can. He made studio films until he didn't. And when he didn't, he made Tusk. And so more than Clerks, if I had to take a Kevin Smith film to a lonely island and hang out with it for a day, I would take Tusk.
Wow. Wow. I'm shocked. I'm
And
not even saying this sarcastically. I'm like, Tusk?
yes. But again, it came from it was again more than the movie. It was how it was created and how it came about and how it just kind of developed from a podcast.
Sure.
And more than filmmaking, I'm not even like no joke. More than filmmaking now, I love podcasting. Not just because it's generally like a free, you know, creative outlet. I just love getting together with my friends and talking shop.
Yeah.
Anybody that's like, hey man, you want to go do a podcast, or hey, you want to jump on my podcast, or hey, you want to whatever, it'll always be a yes. It won't always be a yes forever if somebody's like, hey, you want to go make a movie? Because eventually I'm just going to want to run into a wall and never do it ever again because it's hard. But podcasting is just me jumping on and hanging out with my friends for a little while and talking shop.
Yeah.
But anyway, film wise, Kevin Smith's movie, Tusk.
Tusk. Favorite film of all time. Wow. That's crazy to me. I notoriously I hate
No, it's
Kevin
not.
Smith.
No, it's not. Coming from me, no, it's not.
I would not have expected Tusk to be your favorite Kevin Smith film of all time.
Yeah.
I hate. There are three filmmakers I despise. I hate Kevin Smith. I
Mhm.
hate Rob Zombie, and I hate
Mhm.
Eli Roth. All three of them, I could just be like, if I never saw another one of their movies ever again, it would be too soon. So
Well, two of those people didn't make my list, so I'm
I
kind of
know, I
you
know, I
know,
know.
my head's still above the water.
But what I will say is, Kevin Smith, for as much as I hate him and I dislike him, and I think in a lot of ways Kevin Smith is a. I mean, I'm not going to go into a whole rant on Kevin Smith, but I think he's a
That's
poser.
okay.
I think he's a poser in a lot of ways. But my negativity towards Kevin Smith and sort of what he's about and sort of the films that he's made has nothing to do with the fact that I can absolutely understand why a filmmaker would look at somebody like Kevin Smith, see what he did, and aspire to sort of emulate that kind of thing. I do think he has offered a lot of people. It's the same way in which like Quentin Tarantino influenced a ton of people, right? You see Quentin
Right.
Tarantino, and you might not like somebody might hate Quentin Tarantino's movies, but you're like, okay, I can understand how this guy influenced a lot of people and got them to pick up a movie camera and go out and do their thing. You can
Right.
respect that. You can respect that. I respect Kevin Smith's hustle and at least in the early days, what he was doing. But yeah, Kevin Smith's movies, man, that's like putting a nail gun to my head and just pressing like
I,
the trigger over and over. Ugh,
I I knew it would be a dagger to your heart, uh,
it's okay.
but I was never gonna be like, well, Matt hates this guy, so don't say
Oh
it.
no, no, no. See, that's
No,
the thing. 100% honesty and transparency,
yeah,
for sure
oh
on this
yeah,
show. Because it's don't ever be that person that looks at someone else who's like, "Oh, I was inspired by this guy," and basically shit on them for it. It's like, cool, you're inspired
right,
by Kevin Smith. I personally hate Kevin Smith, and I'll tell you why
right,
to the end of time. But cool, man. Whatever person gets you interested in being creative and making movies and gets you like inspired, that person should be commended. And Kevin Smith, even though I don't like him, he
right,
has been that for many, many people, whether it's podcasting or movie making or screenwriting or YouTubing. I fully understand his impact on a lot of the indie culture at large. So I respect that.
right.
I respect that. So my number one, this is not probably going to be a surprise to you, Josh. Anybody that knows me knows that this is my number one. It will never be usurped. I'm confident in saying it will never be usurped. Even number two through whatever you want to go to, don't even hold a candle to my number one, right? Like my number two is Halloween. I told you it impacted me and made me want to be a filmmaker and do all kinds of creative stuff. That does not even come close to what my number one is. It's untouchable. Untouchable. That is Big Trouble in Little China. Another one by the great John Carpenter. This movie, for me, is perfect. Every frame of this movie is perfect. Every piece of dialogue, every actor, all the effects, the story. This is like the perfect amalgamation of everything that I love. It's got a bit of horror in it, it's got a bit of action, it's got comedy, it's got great characters. I could go on till for another 3 hours talking about why Big Trouble in Little China is the greatest film of all time. Not just like my personal favorite, just the greatest literal film of all time. And maybe someday we will get there on an episode. But to me, that is my absolute number one. I've watched that film, gosh, probably at least 500 times. I'm not even joking about that. 500 times. Think about that one in terms of thinking about a movie and they're an hour and a half long and at least 500 times. How many hours? I can recite this movie. I have it like memorized the entire script. I can recite it word for word. When I'm watching it with my fiance, whatever, I'll just start talk. I'll just deliver all the lines. It drives her crazy.
Right.
So Big Trouble in Little China, that is my absolute number one. It's clearly superior to Tusk. So anyone listening to this, watch Big Trouble in Little China.
Right.
But yeah, no, that's my favorite. That's my favorite movie.
Right. I was gonna throw this out before we started. I was like, Matt's list is just gonna be classier than mine. Because just as a film watcher, you're just a classier person. I just like trash can films. I will dig to the bottom of the trash can, and that will end up on my list.
Well, what's funny is I actually wrote a top 10 because this was originally going to be a top 10 before you could
Right.
only come up with five. I have stuff on my list like Kiss Me Deadly, Treasure of the Sierra Madre, The Big Sleep. I have all of these like
Right.
classic films. I'm like, I have to narrow it down to five. It's got to be the most impactful ones for me. So
Right.
those are mine. So
Right.
yeah, so thank you, Josh, for your top five. I'll just call it four, and then that one is a weird outlier of strange oddities.
That's okay. I can
But
live with that.
yeah, I had a lot of fun on this first episode of the podcast. I hope the recordings turn out well because if they didn't,
Right.
it's gonna be sad. However, we
Oh,
wanted to allow everybody out there on this very first episode to get an idea of where we're coming from. What type of filmmakers we are, our sort of our influences, the different filmmakers that we like, and then as we go forward in the forthcoming episodes, we're going to be focusing on specific aspects of filmmaking. We will bring people on and interview them and discuss their cinematic filmographies, for lack of a better term, and get different perspectives because our perspectives are certainly not the perfect perspectives. I myself am very, very different and have very, very different views on things than other filmmakers do. And I think, Josh, to your credit, it's going to be fun to sort of engage with a lot of these filmmakers and maybe have a little friendly battle back and forth about no,
yeah.
that way. Why would you do something like that? That's that sort
Right.
of thing. But we can talk about all aspects of filming, right? We can talk about script writing, pre-production, cameras, sound, the actual staging of scenes. How do you film how do you film nude content and gore scenes and visual effects and all kinds of stuff. We've had lots
Right.
of experience on all of it, so we have plenty of content. We just got to figure out what our next show topic's going to be. I don't know what it's going to be yet,
Yeah.
but please, anybody out there listening, by the time you listen to this, hopefully we have a name of the show and it's in the thumbnail of the YouTube
Right.
thing. You can email outpostunknown@gmail.com with questions, comments to us. I'll check that email for now, and then if you guys have a topic you would like us to cover, or a topic you'd like us to go in depth on or discuss, please send us an email, and we'll get to it. So with that, Josh, do you have any plugs that you want to throw out there? I mean, you are still an active working filmmaker.
Yeah, but more again, more near and dear to my, and I know I say this like it sounds shitty and it sounds fake, but it's no joke. More than like some my filmmaking and what I'm doing right now. The thing right now that's near and dear to my heart is the Flatwater Film Festival. Um, you can go to Film Freeway, and if you're a Nebraska filmmaker, which is who we're kind of shouting out to, if you got a film like big or small, send it to the Flatwater Film Festival and Film Freeway. It's free. It costs you nothing, and that's the way it should be. So that would be my plug.
Maybe I should submit something this year.
You should.
Maybe.
You should.
We'll see.
You
We'll
should,
see.
and then come out and fucking watch it with people. Because even if,
I am going to try to make it out this year. Last year, I think we were planning to originally film that weekend,
mm-hmm.
but then everything went to hell, and I was not in any mental state to go.
You were gonna plan the film. You were gonna shoot the film that I was in that weekend.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Yeah. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'll definitely
Anyway.
try to make it out this week or this year for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And,
Cool.
we know, Josh. We now live like 3 blocks from each other, so at some point we got to get together and like actually say hello.
Oh yeah, for sure. In person is always better than over this computer shit.
Whenever COVID ends, right? If it ever will. Okay, cool. Thank you for listening, everybody. We'll be back next week, so check us out then.